Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Federico Talks Watches. Today I am once again answering some of your questions, such as why and how long have I owned my Seiko SKX? What are the top 3 watches sold on DelReyWatch.com? And do box and papers actually matter when you're buying a watch? All that and more in today's episode. Now, of course, before we get started, customary wristwatch check. Today I'm wearing my Girard-Perregaux Laureato Evo 3 Moonphase Power Reserve Big Date. Kind of well known for owning this watch. Absolutely love it. And also, guys, don't forget to check out DelReyWatch.com. We just got in an unworn Rolex Oyster Perpetual 41mm with the green dial. Least expensive one in the United States. We got in an extremely rare, full box, full papers, which is even rarer, Vincent Calabrese Power Reserve watch. High horology, independent, yes, based off an ETA movement, but this is from the golden era of watchmaking in the 90s. Absolutely stunning piece. Go check it out. And a very in-demand Girard-Perregaux Laureato chronograph with the blue dial. All that and more at DelReyWatch.com, the best place for a watch geek to buy a watch. Guys, these are the questions you asked on my Instagram account, at Federico Talks Watches. A few times a month, you'll see a Q&A picture pop up. When you see it pop up, ask your question. When I have enough questions, I take it down. Please do not DM me. I do not check it. And of course, in no particular order, Fran Esposto. Hey Fed, how do you feel about collection sizes? As I've become more interested in watches over the years, I found it difficult not to keep buying a bunch of watches I love. But at the same time, I want them all to be special. How do you find the balance? Fran, this is a very personal question. Everybody is different. Generally, when I get above 8 or 9 watches, I start feeling a little antsy. Or 8 or 9 watches above a certain price point. And I start feeling a little antsy for a couple of reasons. Firstly, that's a lot of money in watches. And secondly, I only wear one watch at a time. So how many watches could I really enjoy? Sure, I don't give up a slot to the SKX because, at the price I paid for it, probably back in the day, about $200, I don't feel too guilty about owning it. But I'm not going to own a bunch of watches over $1,000, or my sweet spot is about 8 or 9 watches because I don't feel I can enjoy them all at the same time. So at that point, it becomes one in, one out. Might I have 12 at some point? Sure, but then some point down the line, I'll probably shrink back to 8 or 9, and it's a process. Basically, when I feel like I don't have enough wrist time for the watches that I want to enjoy is kind of when I start culling. Yoav Rogovin. Hey Fed, your Seiko SKX has achieved legendary status. Thank you. Is there any story behind where, when, and why you bought it? Well, here is the SKX. I always keep it in the office unless I travel. So this is probably the watch that's been with me close to the longest, about 10 years. I bought it on Amazon.com back in the day, probably about $200. I know these have gone up a little in price. Why did I buy it? Well, I bought it around 10, 11 years ago when me and my brother took a trip around the world. We did Asia, Southeast Asia, Europe, and then back to the States. I had a few watches, but obviously I didn't want to bring anything super expensive with me on this adventure for multiple reasons. A, for safety. B, I was significantly less stable financially then than I am now. So even more reason to not bring such expensive things with me. And the SKX was kind of iconic. Everybody was talking about it. It was really hot on YouTube back in the day. So I bought it as my travel watch because I had my automatic watch that I could wear with me everywhere from the jungles of Cambodia to the city streets of Paris. Not have to worry about it too much, and I really like the design. But yeah, I just bought it on Amazon.com, but it was for that purpose, and to this day, I still travel with it quite a bit. Scene.objects. Do you ever factor in service costs when buying a watch? Extremely rarely. Unless I'm buying a perpetual calendar or like a minute repeater, then I don't really care. The truth is, service costs money. It costs less than most people think, but Even an expensive service, let's say $1,500 on a watch that costs $10,000. Well, the fact that I'm going to have to service it once every 7 to 10 years, I mean, if I can't afford that, then I shouldn't have bought the watch in the first place. I mean, even if service is $3,000, at least in my personal financial situation, considering it's not $3,000 a year, it's $3,000, maybe once a decade, I don't really factor it in that much, especially because the costs I just said are overblown. Most watches are a few $100 a service. And, I service probably in my collection of 8 or 9, I service maybe one watch a year. So, maintenance is about $500 to $800 a year for my collection. Something which is totally affordable to me. Honestly, I think if you have to worry about the cost of service, then you probably can't responsibly afford the watch in the first place. Now, obviously, it's a generalization, but it does tend to be true. Alexander Karantz. Hey, Fed, why don't we see more high-end quartz options from companies like Omega and Rolex? I'm sure they could create extremely accurate movements that would reach many more customers. High-end accuracy movements seem to be a well-kept secret. Is it due to lack of prestige because of its electronic? Well, Rolex and Omega don't need to make high-accuracy movements. They already exist, and they're extremely inexpensive watches. You can get GPS kind of like watches that sync their movement with like the atomic clock via GPS for under $1,000 for the most part. This has already been invented, and it's quite easy to get. But you're right, it is the prestige. Luxury buyers, once again, this is generalization, don't tend to want quartz movements. They're less artisanal, they're less marketable, they're less special, quote unquote. Not to mention, there's so many competitively priced quartz options that do the exact same thing you seem to want Omega and Rolex to do, that Rolex and Omega are not going to continue in that space. Omega used to make quartz watches. They didn't sell. Breitling makes quartz watches. They don't sell particularly well. The luxury buyer has voted with their wallet, and they don't want quartz watches. Now, I'm not saying quartz is bad. I'm just explaining why Omega and Rolex don't seem to do it too much. Apart from, Omega makes ladies' quartz watches. The ladies demographic does tend to prefer quartz. But you don't need to spend that much money to get a truly fantastic quartz watch. And yes, it is entirely due to lack of prestige, at least in my opinion. Enzo Prats. Hey, Fed, always love tuning into your content on the way to work. Thank you. What's your opinion on watches without boxes and papers? Do they influence my decision? Yes and no. So generally, I don't give a shit about boxes and papers. I can't wear a box, and I don't keep the papers in my wallet. So I really don't care as long as the watch is what I want. Now, I prefer to buy a watch without boxes and papers because they tend to be less expensive. If I can save money and not have a box and paper, then I'd rather do that. I don't give a crap about box and papers. Now, of course, there are exceptions to the rules. Highly collectible watches, maybe consider getting the box and papers because down the line it'll be worth a significant amount more when it's a complete set. But on a general watch that I just plan to wear day to day, I'd rather save the few $100 and not get it with the box and papers. Sam2782. Hey, Fed, what's your favorite era in watchmaking? This is very easy. The late 90s, early 2000s. Yes, there are a few things wrong with this era. There was a lot more ETA-based stuff, but I feel like there was a lot of innovation in this era. New brands popping up. Big brands finally getting famous. The beginning of Journe. Breguet getting bought by Swatch Group and coming back. Jean-Claude Bivet selling Blancpain and then creating Hublot. Now, was that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know. But it was a lot more exciting back then, and it wasn't all hype with everybody has to go in-house. I just remember that era very fondly, and the nostalgia is probably why I choose that era as my golden era. Hey, Fed, what are your top 3 sold watches at Delray Watch? This is very easy. In no particular order, the Omega Seamaster in all its variants. Then we have the Omega Speedmaster in all its variants. Now, yes, there are a lot of variants of Seamasters and Speedmasters. And then the Tudor Black Bay in all its variants. But those are by far the 3 most popular models on Delray. Seamasters, Speedmasters, and Black Bays. Anyway, guys, that's it for today. Please give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Really does help. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any more content. And of course, check out delraywatch.com. Guys, thank you so much, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.